So you mentioned the splintering of the civil rights movement with Martin Luther King's, universalist message on one end, and obviously you had the Black Power movement and the Black Panthers pushing a more race-conscious, anti-racist movement on the other. I think it's safe to say that, especially in the past year, the Black Lives Matter movement takes more after the tradition of Black Power than the tradition of sort of civil rights, Martin Luther King style rhetoric. And one thing that has interested me this year is the fact that multinational corporations have endorsed and tended to side with Black Lives Matter, at least nominally. And the example that I think puts the sharpest point on it is the recent vote in California on Proposition 16, which would have reinstated affirmative action in universities and public jobs. This was supported by Facebook, Uber, Yelp, United Airlines, and so forth. And on the other side, there was no corporate backing whatsoever. So all of the corporations have lined up to support affirmative action in this case, but the people of California ended up on the other side of the issue, including the vast majority of the Latino population in California. So this is, it seems to me there's a strange alliance between multinational corporations and the race-conscious brand of anti-racism represented by Black Power and its legacy. Is this something that you've noticed at all, or do you have a different view of it?
I think the most important word that you said was nominally, at least nominally. That's true. The corporate sector is very much deeply embedded in propaganda. Propaganda is one of their main activities. Public relations industry is one of the hugest industries in the country, which is designed, as its founders explained, to what they called engineer consent, to make sure that people have the kinds of beliefs and ideas that will be conducive to our power and profit. So yes, it's very fine to say nominally we're in favor of Black Power. Remember that they did that at a time when the Black Power movement had the support of about 2/3 of the population. After the Floyd...
Oh, sorry, you mean the Black Lives Matter?
Black Lives Matter,
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Black Lives Matter had about 2/3 popular support after the Floyd murder. The huge popular movement developed, solidarity and so on. I wouldn't say quite that it was oriented toward the Black Power movement. I think it was mixed. It did use the word black, but it was more general. So the organizers and activists of the Black Power movement, if you look at what they were actually saying, a lot of it veered towards King's Poor People movement ideas with proposals that would be quite general. The phrase defund the police got out of hand. But if you look at what was proposed, it was things like, let's reduce police commitment responsibilities for things they have no business doing and don't want to do, like getting involved in domestic abuse or drug overdose or mental health problems. These are things that should be handled by community services. Far better. Police should carry out police activities. They should be better paid, should be better jobs. They should be working with the community. In fact, when Ocasio-Cortez was asked, what do you mean by defund the police? She said, go to any white suburb. That's what I mean by defund the police. If a kid is picked up with an overdose, He's not sent to jail. He's sent for assistance. Family's supposed to help, things like that. That's defund the police. That's not black. I mean, it would affect black communities, poor communities particularly, but it's actually general. So I think it's kind of a mixture if you look at it closely. Now, the race-oriented element of it was exaggerated extensively by the coverage, what I would call the propaganda system. You can use some other word if you prefer. That's what was highlighted, but that was only part of it. Actually, the same was true of the Black Panthers. I was pretty much involved with working with the groups that I was involved in, Resist and others, were pretty closely involved with working with the Panthers. And it was a split. They were very different groups. There were parts of the Panthers that were dedicated organizers working in the community. The breakfast programs, for example, educational programs and others. There were other groups with the Panthers who were basically coming out of the criminal classes and using it as an opportunity to get white support for their activities. And if you wanted to deal with the Panthers, you had to make a sharp distinction. A lot of people didn't. A lot of young activist kids didn't see the difference, ended up destroying their lives. I don't want to give names, but could easily do it. The ones who were the serious organizers, they're the ones who got murdered, like Fred Hampton. Why'd they pick out Fred Hampton for Gestapo-style FBI-run assassination? Because he was one of the main effective organizers of the Panthers. Many of the others kind of left alone. So I think all of these movements are complicated. They don't really have, I think it's kind of misleading to pick up the slogans that became famous and were on the front pages. There's also other things going on. But basically, I mean, you're quite right that there's much more emphasis today on what's called identity politics. These were pretty marginal issues in the 60s, beginning to develop in the 70s. By the 90s, this millennium, there's much more commitment to issues of what's in general called identity politics, race, gender, the sexual preference, gay rights. I mean, until the 20th century, until this century, the country still had anti-sodomy laws. It's a big change.